Welcome to the Prayer Remix. I am Pastor Nicole Martin, and it's lovely to be journeying with you today, especially from this frozen tundra where we are going to be below zero all week long. Our thought for today actually comes from the pub. That's where you have entered today, the pub, where we publicly unwrap beliefs. Last week we asked the bold question, what is a Christian? And it was a pretty fairly simple answer, right? A Christian is anyone who believes that Christ died for them. But I also alluded to the idea that a Christian can be a multitude of flavors. Like ice cream, we have the same basic tenets that Christ died for us. But then, like ice cream, there's mint chocolate chip, and there's, my favorite, German chocolate cake flavored ice cream from Brahms in Texas. Brings back good memories, right? Or vanilla and plain chocolate. Flavorful ice cream. That's kind of how to understand all of the different places that claim to be Christian. But our question for the day is then, our question to ponder is, what does it mean to be a Christian? So if a Christian is simply someone who says, I believe that Jesus Christ died and rose for me and that I have eternal life through him, well, what does it mean to make that proclamation? Is something magical happen to us? What's going on inside of that? Well, I think the best place to begin to answer this question is from Jesus' own words, where he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then love your neighbor as yourself. We can, as Christian people, that's why there's all these different denominations, right? Go down these rabbit holes of concepts like, did the Virgin Mary stay a virgin her whole life, or did she actually end up having children? Or other concepts about, is Jesus really in the bread of communion, or do we just do it as a remembrance? We can argue these points for a really long time. In fact, these points have been argued about for over 2,000 years. But there are places that we all have in common. And one of those places we have in common is to love our neighbor. So what does it mean for me to be a Christian? And what would I think is the basic tenet that all pastors would say? What Jesus said. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, that place way deep down in your belly, right? With all your mind and with all your strength. And then love your neighbor as yourself. It's kind of a tricky passage that I think maybe we spend too much time on negotiating, but it's really rather simple. You know, the golden rule, treat people the way you would want to be treated. Now, I know that gets confusing, especially when my kids were little. I had to wrestle with that concept a lot with them because it was this idea of, well, I will treat them the way they treat me. Well, that's not what it said. It said, treat them the way you want to be treated. So if I want to be treated with love, then I need to be treating people with love. And if I want to be treated with generosity, then I need to treat people with generosity. Not, well, if they treat me with generosity, I'll be generous back. You know, we get into that place in society where they said, well, they brought a gift to my son's Christmas party or my son's birthday party, so now I have to give them a gift back. That's not what it's saying at all. This isn't a you have to do to earn scenario. Jesus already did something, and in the thing that he did, that we believe in, that he died and rose for us, we get the privilege of responding with great joy. So I get to love out whether I'm being loved back or not. Now, Hear me say, I am not advocating for people to stay in abusive relationships, and I'm not advocating for you to be a doormat by someone who isn't treating you well. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying, as a Christian person, you have the freedom to love your neighbor for exactly who they are, not for what you think they are. That wasn't part of the criteria. It simply was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I recognize that in the book Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis challenges that, and he says, well, it's probably hard for us to do because we don't know how to love ourselves very well. And a very wise friend in Williston told me, sometimes what's really important is to parent yourself the way you wished you had been parented. So if you're in a scenario where you don't feel like love is coming towards you, maybe you need to stop and offer yourself love. Parent yourself the way you wished you had been or were, if you had great parents, parented. Give yourself generosity, give yourself love, embrace yourself with kindness. We can be our own worst enemy, which is sometimes, well, I have no proof, is why I wonder why Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Because we can be most certainly our own most critical enemy, right? We can do such a good job of beating ourselves up that we neglect not only to love our neighbor, but ourselves and our children in all of these ways, because that brokenness affects us from the inside. So, know today that in what it means to be Christian is to love. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor in the most simplest basic form, knowing that because of Christ, you are able to enter that relationship of love because of who he is, what he did, and what we are promised for with what we have promised for as an eternal being past this life, which comes from baptism. So that's our topic for the day. If you have any questions or you would like to talk about a topic with me, please feel free to chime in at the bottom of this video. Maybe ask a question, we can wrestle with it together, or maybe you could come over and do a video with me and we could have a good conversation. But until then, know that you are a beautiful child of God. You were created and you are wonderfully made to be in this world, and you were made to be loved. Go out, walk in the hope of Christ, living the gospel as a sign of life.